Hi everyone, Rose Webster here. I want to continue on with this cluster of ocular melanoma cases that have occurred in fairly young people in North Carolina. Now, Dr. Sapna Patel commented on this piece and had stated UV radiation is not connected to ocular melanoma. And I found plenty of evidence, good evidence, that it is. Here's one where Lee and colleagues evaluated the tumor location and found it was concentrated in the macula area and correlated positively with dose distribution, and that solar exposure plays a role in the induction of uveal melanoma. Also, artificial UV radiation from welding and use of sun lamps increases the risk for choroidal and ciliary body melanoma. And this is interesting because this is just 2013, not all that long ago. Uveal melanoma has remained stable over the last 3 decades, so for 30 years. So this is truly unusual. And globally, I found that over 90% of cases occur in white men over 60, in their 60s and 70s, mostly fair skin, blue eyes. And a lot of these young people in North Carolina, or some of them anyways, brown eyes and female. So this is very strange. Here's another study. A direct link was shown between ocular uveal melanoma and UVR exposure. Increased risk of uveal melanoma from the effects of UVR exposure with a severe eye burn. And that a population-based study in Australia found from 1990 to 1998, older men and residents of rural areas may have been related to their exposure to high levels of UVR. And other researchers have shown that ocular melanomas have occurred in locations and regions that receive the highest exposure of solar radiation. And sure, there are a lot of studies that will say things like limited, poorly understood, general, vague supporting evidence, but my sense from looking at it all, and I encourage you to do the same, is that there's a definite link with solar radiation. So I found that comment just strange. Anyways, I want to move on here. The Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, under their ocular melanoma treatment, they state that ocular melanoma is often misdiagnosed. And I found one study that said 24% of the time, and another one that, well, in Canada, and this was just October 2017, this said 2% of cases were clinically misdiagnosed. So let's look at it this way, anywhere from 2% to whatever many is, maybe 24%, I don't know. But the point I'm making is it's not a definitive diagnosis by any stretch. This really caught my eye in the book Immunology, Inflammation, and Diseases of the Eye on page 154. It says, except for sporadic exceptions, immunotherapy for uveal melanoma metastasis has not yet been successful. So this is really serious stuff. Uveal melanoma seems to be able to escape immune responses irrespective of the manner in which the immune system is triggered. And that had me thinking about how Wolbachia can evade the immune system, and it does it by stealth. It actually competes for our mitochondria and certain components of our cells. So this was very eye-opening for me. Incidence of eye cancer in Taiwan, an 18-year review. And this was presented in Dallas, Texas, October 2000. And these are two very interesting snippets. The reason why there is a younger age distribution of East Asian patients with uveal melanoma was unknown. If increased pigmentation really protects individuals from cumulative carcinogenic exposures to develop melanoma, it would be hard to explain why this malignancy occurs earlier in East Asians than white individuals. And again, the average age in the U.S. is 60 to 7 years old, mostly men, fair skin, blue eyes. In this study, the average age of diagnosis was only 48 years old. So again, this was eye-opening. Here's the global sites of Wolbachia-infected mosquito releases. Sun Yat-sen University and Michigan State U in China have been carrying them out the longest and the most releases, knowingly for over 8 years. But in Australia and the US, the two teams have been working on this for 20 years, and the WHO endorses it. So, I want you to just take a look at that. Now, since I drew that map, I found out that while the EPA in purple here approved Florida and California, at that time they also approved Kentucky and New York. So I found that just last week. So that was a disturbing revelation for me. Now, this was interesting. This was from 2002. I found this. Bilateral diffuse uveal melanocytic proliferation, BDUMP, I'd rather call it that. And there have been sporadic reports appearing in literature confirming it a phenomenon as rare, but definitely a clinical entity. And in this study, there are many citation notes alongside that sentence, so I encourage you to look it up. The most consistent reported features are a diffuse thickening of the choroid with benign appearing nevi or spindle cells associated with discrete elevated lesions that may resemble melanocytomas. The appearance may be indistinguishable from a diffuse melanoma of the uvea. Now, this is what perked me up. Overexpression of mutant p53 protein has been described in many malignancies. Its role in uveal melanoma is unclear. Some studies have found a constant overexpression of p53 while others haven't, or failed to do so. Why that p53 is because I know that this has something to do with Drosophila and the genome, the pathways that we share with flies, Drosophila. So from the male-killing symbiont, which is Wolbachia, here's a study that says, in response to DNA damage, a well-known tumor suppressor, gene p53, is activated, which triggers an assemblage of p53-dependent pathways to control cell cycle, DNA repair, and apoptosis. As I said in my last video, I realized there's a whole cellular matrix involved. It's not like one or two or maybe three things. It's a number of things working together that cause these things to happen. And notably, the Drosophila genome encodes a single p53 family member, which is required for DNA damage-induced apoptosis. Apoptosis is cell death, as I'm sure you know. Now, evaluating Drosophila 53 as a model system for studying cancer mutations, it's well known, and this has been, since 2012 or earlier, I think since early in 2000, that p53 is a key tumor suppressor protein. It's in about half of human cancers, p53 is inactivated directly through mutation in its sequence-specific DNA binding domain. Drosophila 53, also known as DMP53, has similar apoptotic functions as its human homologue and is therefore an attractive model for studying cancer pathways. So as much as we hear about mice and all these studies on mice and primates, flies, especially for the nervous system, there is a lot in study literature that shows we share similar gene pathways and for central nervous system function, etc. Now, this is very key. This is from 2000, November 2000. Like its mammalian counterpart, DMP53 also functions in damage-induced cell death. And although Drosophila p53 ranks as the most divergent member of the family yet described, numerous studies establish that DMP53 shares properties with its mammalian counterparts. And they concluded at the end, together these analyses establish that DMP53 can bind to human p53 binding sites. So when Ozatec wrote this submission to the docket opposed to Wolbachia-infected Aedes releases, And I'm not a big Ozotec fan either because that only targets Aedes, and I think Culex are the more worrisome vector. They said the potential genetic modification that may result from the use of Wolbachia-infected zapstream bacterium is wholly undefined, and it could introduce over 1,000 new genes into the target mosquito with unknown consequences. So I'm aghast that they're allowing this. Now, we're really fortunate that this group of scientists, Chen Dong et al., published this paper openly because it did show that Wolbachia can infect mammalian cells, even human cells in vitro, that there is clear potential for the horizontal transfer to animals and humans, and that, in fact, Wolbachia should be further evaluated as cases of human infection. And there was no trace of the nematode worm in that patient that had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So again, to remind you where these releases are, the yellow, red, and purple, and now the EPA has allowed 20 U.S. states that span Tennessee up to Maine, and California and Nevada, those are in purple. And I understand Mosquito Mate, the company in Kentucky that's been working on this 20 years, is applying for a nationwide release. Can you imagine? This is going to be a nightmare. Now, I want to stress this for all the doctors out there and oncologists. Chen Dong et al. Clearly states, notably, the broad-range PCR screen for infection by Rickettsia Aedes, I'm not sure I'm saying that right, revealed an amplicon that, with sequence analysis, showed the presence of Wolbachia 16S rRNA gene sequences in the admission blood sample day 0 and again on day 4. These were identical and clustered with those of supergroup B members of the genus Wolbachia. And Wolbachia-infected belongs to supergroup B, which is the one that Mosquito Mate is claiming doesn't harm animals or humans. And I want to leave you with this. Wolbachia-infected, horizontal transfer events are common over evolutionary time. Bacteria can survive extracellularly for 1 week with no decrease in viability. And the bacteria were able to reinvade cells and establish stable infections at all time points. So 1 week outside of a cell, this can live. So when birds die that eat mosquitoes or bats, and on any given day around the country, there's thousands of these. No one's cleaning this up right away. The dead mosquito remnants, larvae, and eggs will all have Wolbachia in them. They'll find their way into streams and rivers, etc. My sense is that there'll be clusters of populations of people, young people, getting strange cancers, and these people probably will live near open bodies of water because Culex like that. Culex that naturally acquire Wolbachia were better vectors of West Nile virus, which is very related to Zika, supported over 97% within that node, and also malaria. It's not related to Zika. However, Culex quinquefasciatus was also found a better vector of malaria when it naturally acquired Wolbachia. So we have a public health emergency coming, and I would like to stop it. I just think I'll need more of the medical community to come forth and say something and start screening for this before removing eyeballs. It's worth it, because these are serious consequences to these people. And I think out of the almost 24 people, 4 people have died. And these are young folks, I think 30 and under, mostly women. Thanks again for listening. Take care.